Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the LitRPG podcast. I'm Ramon Mejia, here to bring you the latest LitRPG news, reviews, and of course author interviews, episode number 277 of the show. I have 4 new reviews for you folks at home. That's going to include The Last Light, book number 5 in the Wandering Inn series, also Mother of Learning, arc number 1, Apocalypse Game, a LitRPG adventure, The Chessboard War, book number 1, and Trapped in a Webnovel as a Good for Nothing. I woke up, or as it's also called, I Woke Up as a Villain, which is a webcomic we're reviewing for you this week on the show. All those great stories, of course. Before we get into any of that, we're going to go into LitRPG news. And in LitRPG news, we're going to start with the wonderful deal from Christmas deal from Jacob Tanner. He's put the first book in his popular Tower Climber series on sale, 50% off, for the month of December. So it's a nice way to get a very inexpensive first book and a very popular series. He's also noted in his Facebook post that with that particular price, you can actually get the ebook and the audiobook, because you get the audiobook at a discount for discounted price as well. So number of great ways to pick up the first book in a popular series. In other LitRPG news, we have the annual Gameless Society charity drive. It has begun, and the money collected on GoFundMe goes to Shriners Hospital for Children. This is an annual charity event founded by Blaze Corbin, who's a LitRPG author and also the founder of the Gameless Society on Facebook. And every year for the last, this will be the 4th year, I believe, raise lots of good money for a very good charity. So there we go. On to stuff that is out now. It's just all the stuff that's come out since the last time we aired the podcast, and that's going to include Castle Manager and Isekai LitRPG Progression, The Fantasy World of Dorban, book number 3. Also, Defiance of the Fall, book number 3 is out as well, as is Hunter Stream Online. Also, Into the Twilight, Viceroy's Pride, book number 1. Also, VR Hero, book number 5, as is the second book in the Outcasts in Another World series. Also out is the second book in the Fair Quest series called The Rise of Chess. Also out is a new side story in the Awaken Online universe called Happy. We also have Cleaver's Edge, Morkster Chef, book number 1. Also out is Salvo's book number 4. The second book in the Guardians of Astrofall series is out as well, called Astrofall. The 5th book in the Dark Thorn series, Academy, is out for you to enjoy. Also out is The Healer of Magic and Lance, and the 6th book in the Noobtown series called Nautical Noobs. Also out is Hellscape, a post-apocalyptic LitRPG, and The Frost Ridge, the 4th book in the Way series. Also out is Trials of Spawning Grunt, and the Aussie Mana Apocalypse, book number 4. Also is the 13th book in the Dragonheart series called Demon City, and the 3rd book in the Beast Realm series. And finally, the 4th book in the This Trilogy is Broken series called This Plot is Bananas. So not obviously a trilogy, but 4th book, and it's supposed to be the final book according to the author. Okay, on to new LitRPG audiobooks. We have the System Apocalypse Australia edition, written by Tao Wong and Katie Hanna. Book number 1 called Town Under, out as an audiobook. We also have Original Enchantment, True Calling, Cleaver's Edge, Monster Shelf, book number 1. Also out is Salvo's book number 2 as an audiobook, as we have Alpha Zero, and the Crafting Death, Towers and Rifts series, book number 2. Also out is Immersion Online, book number 2, The Zealot, and Beast Realms, book number 3, Revelations. We also have Defiance of the Fall, book number 3, and War Core, book number 1, Hold the Line. We also have Towers of Acalia, book number 4, out as an audiobook, as do we have The Heavenly Thrones, book number 6. We also have Artificial Jelly, book number 2, and Challenger's Call, book number 2, and Weight of It All series, book number 3, and also a new Dungeon Core series from Jonathan Brooks called Core Establishment, Dimensional Dungeons Core, book number 1. Okay, a lot of stuff that is coming up in the near future called Upcoming LitRPG. This is just where I've scrolled through the many pages of Facebook to find all the pre-orders that are out for you to plan your reading and publishing schedule around, and of all the titles I could find up and through February. And so starting with December the 14th, we have Uncontrollable, a LitRPG adventure. December the 14th as well is going to be Frostworld book number 3. December the 15th, The Sleepless Ones book number 9. December the 15th, according to Daniel Shinhofen, with the 8th and final book in the Apocalypse Gate series for now, called One Nation Under. We also have Simon Vale's Fantasia book number series. Book number 2 in that series will be out on December the 16th. We also have on December the 20th, the Planeswalker series, book number 2. December the 21st, it'll be Epiphany Realms, book number 2. On December 26th, it'll be Adventures on Brad, book number 7. December 28th, it'll be Alpha Rome, book number 3. December 28th as well, it'll be He Who Fights with Monsters, book number 4. January the 3rd, it'll be Unfrozen, book number 3. January the 4th, it'll be Buccaneers Do, book number 2. January the 4th, it'll be Magnus, book number 3. January the 4th, the 8th and final book in the Viridian Gate series, called Viridian Gate Online, Empirical Endgame. On January the 10th, it'll be Shaman's Call, Spirit Song. On January the 17th, it'll be Adventures on Brad, book number 8. January the 18th, The World of Magic, book number 3. February the 7th, Adventures on Brad, book number 9. And February the 14th, Black Centurion. February the 15th, it'll be The Legend of Ranelagh Ghost Town, book number 2. February the 22nd, it'll be Blessed Time, book number 3. February 22nd, it'll be Defiance of the Fall, book number 4. February 25th, it'll be Discardium, book number 10, Cleared Threat. And February 28th is going to be Alpha Physics, book number 4, Outbury. So there we go. All kinds of new stuff that's going to come out in the near future for you to plan your reading schedule and your publishing schedule if you're an author. On to new releases and reviews. Okay, first up this week is going to be The Last Light, book number 5 in the Wandering Inn series, written by Pirate Alma. It is 1,791 pages. It is $3.99. It is not, however, available on Kindle Unlimited, but it's also available free on the internet. If you go to wanderinginn.com, you can read all the chapters for free. So this is just a nice way to support an author whose stuff you enjoy. And here's the author's description. Kings awake and emperors build new lands, changes coming to the world. From the king of destruction moving to a certain doctor finding more friends from home. The Wandering Inn has a princess who solves problems rather than creates them, and her name is Lynette. Yet, what happens when the innkeeper returns to manage her inn? Lynette must learn to be a good employee rather than manage everything herself, and sharing power is never easy. Nor is it ever simple in war, but that is where Geneva Scala remains, in bloodier and increasingly brutal battles. The Last Light of Belarus is now growing in fame, but there is no future there. She is desperate and working against hostile forces who see her interventions as dangerous and still bears the wounds of her previous war to save lives, but she is no longer alone. Okay, this is a collected serial story. The author has a Patreon page. They put out the most recently written chapters there. Then they go to thewanderinginn.com where you can read it for free. And this series is like super long. Like this is like what the 5th book in this series, but it's only the 4th volume according to like what's online out of 8. So this is like a super duper long series. And then it is a serial story. And the nature of a serial story is that the author posts chapters on a regular basis. And they're just kind of collected for the novel version. And what that means is that the story isn't always a novel-sized plot with like a 3 or 4 act structure. Instead, sometimes there are some side stories, and then it moves around to different side stories and different side characters. And that's a lot of what the first part of this novel is. When this story focused on the characters that I loved, the characters from the first book, Aaron, Ryoka, even the Nantinium, or any of the original characters from the first book, or in that area, I thought it was amazing. I thought it was really good, and what is on its own is great. However, a good portion of the novel does shift to these, I don't want to say like side stories or just like short stories for other characters that are sometimes interwoven into the main storyline or just on their own. And the author wants to write stories about different people of different continents in this kind of RPG universe. And they're not bad at all. They're entertaining in their own rights. They're just not as good for me because they're characters I don't really care about. So like if they die or if they live or they succeed or they don't, I don't care as much. Like there are some side characters like the Doctor that I really enjoyed, and seeing her group expanding is really nice and interesting. But the stories I really loved always are going to revolve around that main character series, around the Wandering Inn, which is the title of the series in the book. So any of those characters, and those once this novel got back to them, I was like, oh, this is great. And you'll see that reflected in a lot of the reviews, and that a lot of people are like, oh, some of the side characters just ruined it for me. I couldn't continue on. And I encourage you, if that's the case for you, if you find yourself not really interested in the beginning of it, because it is about side characters and those little stories, skip past them. It's a serial story. Like, it really is. Like, you can absolutely skip past them, and you're not really going to lose out on much, and just get to the characters that you really love, and I think you'll enjoy a lot more. Or you can just read through it and know that these characters are probably going to be interwoven into the main series at some point in the future. But again, this is kind of what you're going to get with a collected serial collection. And you either like it or not. For me, I took a couple points, like 9 points, like full decimal points off of the story. Just because, again, my enjoyment was lessened a little bit, like a lot of people, for these other side characters. However, I'm sure somebody out there who's reading this, like, I love those side characters so much, they were better than the original or something. Like, absolutely great. Make sure you leave that comment in the review for this book, because the authors, that's one of the ways you can support an author you like. Leave a nice review, buy the book. There we go. So for me, still a really good book. But again, it is a serial collection, but I recognize that going in. So it's still a very entertaining story for me. But for me, the older characters are the ones that I love the most. So it gets a score of 7.8 out of 10. Still a really good review score. For The Last Light, book number 5, The Wandering Inn. Next up is going to be Mother of Learning, arc number 1, written by Nobody103 or Damago Kurumek. It is 644 pages, $4.99. It's not available on Kindle Unlimited. Here's the author's description. Zorian Kaczynski has all the time in the world to get stronger, and he plans on taking full advantage of it. A teenage mage of humble birth and slightly above average skill, Zorian is attending his third year of education in Syria's Magical Academy. A driven and quite young man, he is consumed by a desire to ensure his own future and free himself of the influence of his family, resenting the Kaczynskis for favoring his older brothers over him. Consequently, Zorian has no time for pointless distractions, much less other people's problems. As it happens, though, time is something he's about to get plenty of. On the eve of Soria's annual summer festival, Zorian is murdered, and then abruptly brought back to the beginning of the month, just before he was about to take the train to school. Finding himself trapped in a time loop with no clear end or exit, he will have to look both within and without to unravel the mystery set before him. He does have to unravel it too, because the loop clearly wasn't made for his sake, and in a world of magic, even a time travel isn't safe from those who wish him ill. Fortunately for Zorian, repetition is the mother of learning. Okay, this story has a slow start. I'll be honest, at the beginning I was a little confused because it does start in the main character's third year at this magical academy. And then for a moment I was like, did I miss the first 3 years in another novel? Am I reading this in the wrong order? And nope, it's just, that's how it starts. You start off the main character living a normal life in the story, and it's not until you get about 20% in that you get to the regressor or the time loop aspect. Everything before that is just this casual slice of life story of the main character going to a magical academy, whining about his family. You get a little bit of world building, but it's mostly just like, introducing the characters that you're going to be seeing on repeat in a loop for the rest of the story. But once you hit that 20% mark, then the premise pops in, and you see, this is a time loop kind of story where the main character is reset back to the same beginning section. But that first 20% is kind of rough for a lot of people because it's not particularly entertaining. And most of the story is, again, a slice of life adventure. It is not LitRPG. I'll say that right at the bat. It's more of a progression fantasy story. There aren't many RPG aspects to it. There's no like notifications or anything like that. It's mostly just like, the main character's ramping up his power as he resets and goes on. But I read it, so I'm going to do a review on it. I need content. There are a few twists in the story as new allies and enemies appear, but for the most part, it really is a story about training and growing in power and exploring things. And that's what it is. It's kind of this slice of life story where the main character accrues higher levels of training, higher magical skills to avoid this upcoming disaster that started off his time looping thing in the first place. And if you like this kind of story, this is probably pretty decent for you. I've read others of this type, and I found them to have been done probably a little bit better, just because they have a story like this, which is a long running serial story, to kind of see how this goes and figure out, okay, I'll write this mine a little bit differently, maybe tighten it up in some aspects, because there are definitely points in the story where I'm like, okay, I see the main character training, but there's not a lot of antagonists, and there aren't a lot of like enemies that are really making this a high stakes story. Every time he loses or dies, he really is just reset and he just starts again. Or he sometimes will take multiple time loops where he's just focusing on studying a particular branch of magic, to make up for his lack of like natural magic mana depth or something, or he takes an entire branch and explores getting to know certain characters, and that's perfectly fine. But it is just more of a slice of life entry, and it's a lot more casual, right up until about the end when you get a larger antagonistic force and there's some changes in the structure. I'm trying to spoil things, but again, it is very casual, and this is again another serial story that has been collected for you to enjoy. There's more of it online if you want to go check it out. But again, it's not really a LitRPG story. It doesn't claim to be. It's kind of a close cousin. I think a lot of LitRPG readers will enjoy it, but it is definitely more progression fantasy, in that there is no hard coded like, oh, hits level 1 in this, or he's S rank in this. It's his progression is definitely noted. And it does have that arcing curve, like, oh, he starts out pretty weak and he grows in power as he continues through his time loops. So I think LitRPG rules are enjoyable. But again, enjoyable story for me. Got a score of 7.5 out of 10, kind of middle of the road good for me. And that's mostly because I've read others of this type, and I've thought that they've done this a little more tight in introducing new antagonists throughout the time loops. So there you go. That's Mother of Learning, arc number 1, with a score of 7.5 out of 10. Okay, next up it's going to be Apocalypse Games, a LitRPG adventure, The Chessboard War, book number 1, written by Grayson Sinclair. It has 562 pages, it is $4.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited, and here's the author's description. The apocalypse game has begun, and all of humanity is up for grabs. To the victor, go the spoils. My name is Killian Dunn. I'm 18, a high school senior, a gamer, and oh yeah, the harbinger of the apocalypse. Not exactly what I had in mind as a career path. Reality took a nosedive when Armageddon came a-knockin'. It brought with it classes, levels, and skills, as well as a horde of Lovecraftian abominations to use them on. I never wanted any of this, but the sick god who orchestrated this whole nightmare has my family. Their lives are forfeit if I refuse to play his game. He left me no choice but to accept my role and play my part, not as just another piece on the chessboard, but as the king, the demon lord of the black. But if I'm the villain, then there must also be a hero. I'm on the side of the white. On the side of the white stands the archangel, and they're as determined as I am to win. The prize, a single wish. With it, I can protect my family, fix everything that's broken, and save the whole world. I just have to destroy it first. Okay. In general, I've really enjoyed the RPG apocalypse subgenre of LitRPG. I think a lot of things are there in an inherent set of risks. It's the end of the world. You have monsters everywhere. There's a survival aspect that you also find co-mingling from like zombie apocalypse stories. However, this story didn't have much of that. And it didn't really work for me. The setup is okay. I get that the entire world is a RPG apocalypse with a specific set of game parameters. And I thought the faction versus faction like setup is actually like, okay, I haven't seen this very much before, so good on you. But the story felt really forced for me in a lot of ways, and that's a pet peeve of mine. And I can't get over that. And the more the story went on, the more I saw it again and again and again. When the author I felt like the author was taking away the decision-making process from the main characters, and he was forcing down a particular path to fulfill a plotline or to fulfill particular game mechanic roles. And I never liked that. I hate to see the strings when a story character is kind of guided in a certain way. I know in every story that happens, it's a preformed story where somebody's writing it, but so I hate feeling like the character is forced. because a lot of the things I enjoy in a literary story specifically is all the opportunities for choosing and for how you're going to advance. And that doesn't really exist here, unfortunately. The main character doesn't get a choice to become the Demon Lord. And over again, he reveals his big secret, despite ample evidence that people are going to assume he's evil just for having the class, which doesn't make sense from the first place. Like, why? This is a real world. This isn't some, it's like a fantasy world where people are like, "Oh, you're the Demon Lord. You must be evil. We have to kill you." Or I'm inherently angry at you. And part of that setup is part of that like discontinuity for me is that the author does something that's it's a choice, I guess. I just didn't like the way the story was set up, and that the RPG apocalypse starts. The holder is set here, and as the main character is talking to the guy who set it up, he's kind of advanced. He loses a month of the apocalypse, and everybody else gets a month to level up, a month to figure out the mechanics, a month to do whatever faction stuff or grouping stuff they're going to do. And so he starts a month. Why? I don't understand why that had to be the case, but that's another choice. But it does set up a lot of things that the reader isn't aware of, like all the things that have happened for these characters. And so there's a ton of world building that could have been done if the main character had kind of gone through things with everybody else. But instead, he shows up as a noob and doesn't know what's happening, and so he keeps making mistakes repeatedly. And again, a lot of these things just felt like they were forced. Like the main character has to tell people he's the Demon Lord for some reason. And I understand in the story wise, a part of it revolves about him finding people to fill his faction roles, but that's what it felt like. It felt like these decisions were made to advance the plot, not because they were natural ones that a character in the situation would make on his own. And that really irked me because it felt like a forced story. And again, I know it's a pet peeve for me. It's not going to be for everybody, but it is what it is. Additionally, the game mechanics in the story, they exist and they're shown regularly, and there's some unique aspects to it, like the faction aspects or the different faction roles for characters the main character wants to put in those. But in addition, there are standard stuff like stat points and levels and abilities and powers that are unlocked as the main character levels. But it always felt like in the story when I was reading it that the stats really didn't mean a ton. If you were deficient in a stat, it didn't really impact the story in any way, shape, or form. If he added extra points to a particular group of stats, it didn't really change the way he fought. And that's mostly because when he used his Demon Lord abilities or powers, they seem to overpower what I would expect from a level 1 character, especially when you're considering he's a low level character. Everybody else is much higher level characters because they had a whole month to level grind. And yet he kind of overpowers them with his abilities. And so that's not really reflected, to me at least, in the stats aspect of the story. But what is here, notifications, the character sheets, all the abilities and skill descriptions, very consistent throughout their story as far as them existing. But there you go. Other than that, though, the other game mechanics felt fairly decent. And again, I thought the faction stuff was fairly original. Overall, action is pretty decent in the story. Bantering between characters is okay. Again, some of those relationships felt forced as well for me in how they existed and stuff that happened between the character and other characters, the main character and other characters outside of the existence of the story. And that's always the thing that bugs me too. Is like, oh, you're talking about things that the reader's never going to get a chance to see. Or is it really explained? It's just like, oh no, we had a relationship and your memory was wiped though, and I'm never going to talk about it again. But here we are starting things over. I'm like, okay, whatever. So again, a lot of forced access for me that I just couldn't enjoy the story, unfortunately. Additionally, I never really felt a sense of danger for the main character or anyone in the story, really. Like I said, the other aspects of an RPG apocalypse, like resource limitations, like people vying for resources, I never really felt that here. Like there was never really a lot of danger for the main character. Even in the fights, it never really felt like he was going to lose. It never felt like anybody was really in any danger, unfortunately, which is kind of a staple of RPG apocalypse. Like everybody could die at any instant. It's kind of a thing for that, in my opinion. at least. But other than that, that was it. Other folks really enjoy the story. There's lots of positive reviews here, so I always encourage you to go check out the book for yourself if you think it's going to be interesting. You're not sure, check out the sample, see if it rings, if it resonates with you. For me, though, the story just didn't work for the reasons I stated for me. But again, not a bad story necessarily, just aspects didn't work for me. So for me, it gets a score 6 out of 10. That's Apocalypse Games, a LitRPG adventure, Chessboard War, book number 1 with a score of 6 out of 10. And next up, we have Trapped in a Web Novel as a good for nothing. I woke up as a villain. It is a webcomic that we're reviewing today. It's going to be 55 chapters officially. Elsewhere, 76 chapters if you can find them. The first 2 chapters on Tapas, which is the official English publisher, are for free. The rest you got to unlock. So there we go. And here's the webcomic description. While working overtime through several nights, he fell asleep for a short while. When he woke up, he seemed to be possessing the villain of the web novel he was reading. Well, how typically cliche, to the point where I'd end up dead if I were allowed or were to follow the predetermined fate. Darn it. He need to find a way to survive. The first way to survive as a good-for-nothing villain in the web novel: convince as many people as possible to be on my side. The second way to survive as a good-for-nothing villain in the web novel: become strong enough to protect myself. Lastly, the third way to survive as a good-for-nothing villain in a web novel: never become friendly with the proud and insane returnee master. But what should he do? Even before he possessed the body, the original owner already caused an incident. Use your money to kill the returnee master who has yet to regain his power? Are you crazy? Then who will stop the Demon King? And that is the actual description for both the web novel and for the webcomic. Then it says, this is the beginning of the modern-day survival dungeon raider fantasy story of Choi Yu-sung, the possessed villain who wants to live a laid-back lifestyle. This is the webtoon version of the author So-yeon Hyun's popular web novel, Trapped in a Web Novel as a Good-for-Nothing. So there we go. There's a web novel version of this. If you like this so much, you got to go ahead. But for me, I've never really enjoyed the web translated web novels as much as I have the manhwas and the webcomic versions. I just love the visual inclusion, the action that comes across so much better, especially for like describing the city scenes and the actual background stuff, which is often very lightly described in the light novel versions of these stories. And again, has an actual English translator, official, and that's going to be Tapas, so go check them out. But you can also find it other places if you want to go past that 55 marked chapters. Okay, this is a story where the main character is a normal person who finds himself trapped in the body of a villain of the story they were reading. The main character knows his character is fated to die at the hands of the hero unless he changes things, and he uses the RPG interface and his own foreknowledge of the story to change his character's path. It's a bit like a regressor story in that the main character uses knowledge he wouldn't normally have to gain an advantage and grow powerful. The story setting and pacing are pretty casual. The setting, and again, this is one of the things, there's another story called Omniscient Reader, that is a much darker and more fast-paced storyline. This is not dark. It's not the RPG apocalypse. It's just a regular modern setting where like people are, where there are dungeons and there are people who clear the dungeons. I think they're called, if I recall, rankers. It could be some other title. And the main character wants to be is one of those people who has these powers that are meant to be used to defeat the system, defeat the dungeons, and use that experience to grow powerful and get new skills and abilities and increase their class levels and stuff, or their class rankings. And that's mostly what the story focuses on. Focuses on the main character who's exploiting his foreknowledge to gain enough power to survive the challenge he knows is coming. And at the same time, he's trying to work out how not to change things so much that the story shifts and maybe the main character's actual story dies, because he's not the main character. He's supposed to be this secondary villain that dies early in the novel. So he can't change things too much. And so there's a nice, interesting balance of exploiting his foreknowledge, but also interacting with the character who's supposed to be the hero, and other characters who come in and out, villains in the story. And I really enjoyed personally the exploitation aspect of foreknowledge. That's always a fun thing for me because it leads you in directions where the main character becomes powerful, but he still has to work through it. And it's kind of nice. But again, this story is fairly casual in its revealing. There's no like fast-paced plot. There's no like immediate threat to the universe that anybody's trying to overcome. Is it's that threat is kind of like, oh, it's coming in the future at some point, and we're up to chapter 77, and we're still fairly casual in the main character just gaining powers. The RPG aspects are fairly light with letter rankings. Like, it's instead of like level numbers or like levels or class levels, it's the main character has powers and skills that are ranked like A through F and then S and SS. So it's more of a Final Fantasy kind of ranking system that describe overall power and skills instead of number of levels. The main character sees lots of notifications. There are plenty of those throughout the entire story, so it is LitRPG. And as far as the RPG side, he goes from a mediocre ranker to using his foreknowledge and about the novel world to gain unusual skills and boost in powers. And I like the combination and the smart thinking of the character to do and exploit those aspects. So good stuff there. Overall, I enjoy the casual reading pace. But again, it is pretty casual. It's one of my weekly reads as new chapters are translated and come out. So there we go. For me, good score 7.5 out of 10. A nice, good, solid, middle of the road, good review for Trapped in a Web Novel as a good friend, I think, or as it's called on Top of Us, I Woke Up as the Villain. Thank you very much, folks, for taking the time to listen. That's the end of the show. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Patreon, our website at litrpgpodcast.com, Spotify, and Audible. If you want to get these episodes just to listen to us on a regular basis on your favorite streaming apps. We also have links in the show notes for other LitRPG Facebook groups where authors and readers kind of intermingle, or we can get recommendations for new stories from yourself. Remember, if you want to enjoy the podcast and you want to support us in any way, shape, or form, you can find all the ways to do so at litrpgpodcast.com/support. Plenty of ways to help keep the podcast going. Remember, we depending on you guys for the financial support to keep this podcast going. It's not free; it costs money. But with your support, either on Patreon or through the other means, we keep this thing going because we don't like to take on ads or other things. Although that may change if our costs increase. So there you go. Thanks again for hanging out with me today. Until we can hang again, remember to go read some LitRPG. Goodbye, everybody.